As Chief Schaefer said, we each get a presentation to do for a line of duty death. One thing I will preface, I talked to him about this, if there's somebody in mind you want to do, you start researching it. I think we're like every 4th month going on, or every 3rd month, something like that. So the next will be Lieutenant Besler's group, I think is in June, right? May. So I think you're probably the last one. Lieutenant Wecker, your group, if you know something you want to do, send an email to him of who it is. He'll email out the rest of the group so they don't do it. They don't take it from you. So if you wanted to start research, I know we talked about this at lunch. So I picked Kyle Wilson. Has anybody heard of this one? Raise your show of hands. Anybody heard of Kyle Wilson? Nobody? Other than Chief Schaefer. So I did mine on Technician 1. That's what their classification is. Kyle Wilson, line of duty death, April 16, 2007. Now what I found is anything more than about 5 years old, you're going to have a hard time finding good videos, good audios, things like that, because a lot of that stuff didn't exist back in 2007. I know that seems weird, but I think the iPhone first came out in 2005, I think. So not as many people had the technology we have nowadays, so if you pick somebody that's a little bit, not to sound insincere, but fresh or dead, that's happened more recently, then you're probably going to get a lot more information, a lot more videos, things like that to show. I don't have a lot of what I did was through NIOSH. I also researched the department and found they put out a report themselves on top of the NIOSH report. So I've got some information from that too in here. Some of it's just a copy and paste, I'm not going to lie. There is a lot of information to read through, and you could read for probably 2 full days of nothing but reports upon reports upon reports, and it starts out sad, then it gets kind of to the point where you're like, oh man, that's just so much information. I found stuff in fire engineering magazines, you know, your firehouse.com, all that stuff is going to have resources. You have to determine what's relevant, what's not, what's an opinion of a writer, what's actual reports that are legitimate. So I picked this one. As you see when we go through it, it's going to be about a 24-year-old guy.
Phone number 121, medic 123, 303 Danielle Road.
This is Kyle Robert Wilson, or May 25th, 1982. This happened in 2007. That makes him 24 years old when this happened. Young kid. He graduated from high school in Virginia called Hilton High School in 2000. I can't find a lot of information about it. Again, some of the reports are sketchy about him. He briefly attended college. I think it was a 2-year college. I don't know which one. They briefly talked about him going to college. He joined the department January 23rd of 2006. In June of 2006, he graduated from recruit school. He was then assigned to Engine 512, and we'll go through the structure of this department. Shortly after his graduation in 2006. He died in the line of duty April 16, 2007, less than 1 year on. He left behind his father, mother, 2 siblings, and his fiancee named Christy, and we'll see a little bit of her in the video I've got at the end of this. So about the personnel involved, and some of this stuff is so out of order, it's really hard to put a good timeline together for training, but about the personnel involved, I'll give you some information. But Kyle, this is some of his training. He completed the Firefighter 1 and 2 training. He's done CPR, Critical Incident Stress Management, Hazmat, Firefighter Survival Skills 1 and 2, which I've not heard of that. Chief, is that a national thing?
It's probably something Virginia.
For something Virginia, okay. Infection control, several other technical courses. Again, he was less than a year on. About the incident commander, as you can read, he is advanced national incident management system training. He's intermediate and advanced incident command system courses, hazmat courses, various other administrative personnel and technical courses. He's been on the department 24.5 years as of that. So 12 years later, it'd be 36 years. I'm not sure. I think he's retired, but I couldn't find anything else on him. So he may still be with the department. So again, this will make a little bit more sense. First arriving engine, which they called a wagon at the time. I think it's an East Coast thing. The lieutenant had completed some of his trainings with firefighter 1 and 2, fire officer 1, incident officer, hazmat courses, fire ground tactics, and about 8 years on the job. And then the lieutenant on fire tower 512, again, he's got a lot of the classes, fire officer 1 and 2, the firefighter survival skills, again, I think that's a state thing. He'd been a career firefighter for 8 years also. So this will come into play here. So a little bit about that department. So it's Prince William County. Again, when you read the NIOS report, they do not name the department. And I don't even think they named the name, did they? I've read so many things and going back and forth. So what I did is I did a Google search. Google's our friend. I did a Google search and I found out which line of duty diff. It's not hard to find that. It's just NIOS will not name names. So I found out it's Prince William County Fire Department in Northern Virginia. A little bit about them. They're about 35 miles from DC. DC's got a lot of money. I mean, they're politicians. They got a lot of money. Big ass houses. It's about the same distance from Carmel to downtown Indianapolis, maybe a little bit further. Noblesville. A lot of DC people live in this area in Prince William County. I did find that out. 48 square miles, that's a pretty good size. Again, this is a county, population of 384,000. I think it's about the size of Hamilton County, population-wise. At the time, they had 452 career in 2007, and as of 17, just to kind of give you some numbers differences, they had 641 career firefighters. In 2007, they had 1,026 volunteers. Again, this is a county-wide department, and I'll explain to it. We'll go into a little more detail here in a minute. As of 2017, they were down to 81 volunteers. That's the best I could find. So the department itself doesn't give the greatest numbers as of today. Actually, I think these numbers did come from the department. So during the fiscal year 2007, they made 38,638 emergency incidents that were recorded for the county. That's quite a bit. So a little bit more about it. It is a combination department. It is comprised of both the Department of Fire Rescue and 8 volunteer fire rescue departments within it. I'm telling you, if you've never been to the East Coast and see their structure, the way they're set up, there's a lot of county departments that are set up this way. Especially some of your outside the main cities like Baltimore, Maryland. They get outside of that, they've got, what is it, the other Prince County.
There are a whole bunch of them. Prince George.
But they do a combination of both. Some of your engine companies, some of your houses are volunteer, but they're within an organization that's a combination of both. It would kind of be like taking Hendricks County and making it one department and leaving some of your volunteer departments out west, most of your career out here, maybe throwing an engine out there in combination with some other apparatus. It's crazy. It's really weird.
It's what they did several years back.
So this happened in 1966. They established this countywide department in 1966. And these organizations collectively work together to provide high-quality, efficient firefighting emergency services to Prince William County. Again, it's a pretty good-sized county, and it's pretty close to money. Whoops. Well, there again, go back to that last one. It currently consists of 722 members, combination of civilian and uniformed personnel. So a little bit more about the department. So when you're on their department, you can be assigned to one of 2 divisions, a day shift or shift work. And just day shift doesn't necessarily mean you're a chief officer or you work in the admin. Day shift might mean you work 12-hour shifts. So again, it consists of 4 12-hour days from 6 to 1800. That could be staff people. That could be certain stations that they feel need to be staffed at certain times. Again, it is a weird setup. Again, just like anything else, they have all weekends off, federal holidays, and I believe there are 4 12-hour days that get a floating day in there. So it might be a Monday, it might be a Thursday. Shift work, again, is 1 24-hour shift, 48 off. Just like us, the difference is they start at 6 a.m. That's important to think about. Their shifts are 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. Once a month, they have a regular day off, which gives an employee a 5-day break. I think that's called a Kelly Day. I think that's what it's a Kelly Day. They don't call it a Kelly Day, they call it an RDO. So if you want to sell it to something else. Okay, so about the department and what they are. They have 4 battalions. They monitor 22 fire stations. Each station is uniquely equipped to serve the population within where they're at. Some of them have engines, medics, squads, hazmat units, boats. They've got grass rigs. They've got a combination of anything, depending on what their demographics is, depending on what they staff in that firehouse. There's a total of 21 engines, 7 frontline ladders, 5 rescues, 37 ambulances, 2 hazmats. I don't think this is actually accurate to the time frame. From what I understand, there was only 2 rescues at the time. And part of what they had to change was providing more specialized, and they added 3 more rescues. So that's pretty much what they comprise of today. Again, you're looking at 12 years ago, finding information from what it was 12 years ago, try figuring out our information from 12 years ago. Those over here don't even remember what the hell it was. So each station is comprised of at least 1 captain as the station commander, who is also assigned to the engine. All other apparatus have lieutenants assigned to them. It's kind of the same concept. They have a station captain and they have lieutenants. So to give you an idea, so 1 battalion is staffed by a 24-hour battalion chief, Battalion 501. And I'll show you what they cover. Battalion 502, this is a 12-hour battalion chief. Battalion 503 is a 24-hour battalion chief. And then Battalion 504 is a 12-hour. So they got 2 24s and 2 12s. It's really weird how they operate. Again, you've got volunteer, which I think they're true volunteer. They don't get paid at all. And you've got some full-time career staff people. Going back to that, they do all have battalion chief aides, from what I understand. I know it'd be great, wouldn't it? So this is the structure of the organizational chart. As you can see, 5 stations, 6 stations, 7 stations, 4 stations. Depending on where they're at geographically, depends on what they cover. So to give you an idea of what we're getting ready to deal with, Battalion 3 this is where this all happened, and the red one. So again, it's a lot of stations. It's a big area. Again, if you look this stuff up, this one's got an engine, a tanker, a medic, and a boat. Battalion 4's district, which is a volunteer battalion chief. So interesting information. Again, I went to Baltimore, Maryland. I did a class out there. They took us out to one of the firehouses that was a volunteer station within the county of Baltimore County. I'm sorry, it wasn't Baltimore County, it was outside of that. And it's really weird how they operate. A lot different than what we're used to, I can tell you that. And they have a lot of pride in the fire departments too. Lots of pride in those fire departments. So again, I'm going to fast forward here a little bit and we'll go back to some information here. So the incident information is it happened on April 16th, 2007. We're getting ready to come up on the anniversary of that. In Virginia, April, it's a little cool still. It's kind of like Indiana, we're about on the same plane. The big thing is there were sustained winds of 25 mile an hour, gusts of 48 miles an hour. And that makes a big difference in why this happened, why it happened. Temperature was 45 degrees, it was early morning. 19 911 calls received. I think that's a typo, but that's what I found. It said 19 911 calls. Keep that in mind too, 19 911 calls. They that close to neighbors? Again, immediate systematic search for rescue the victims. So that's their primary objectives on all fires. Here's their first alarm assignment on this particular incident. Again, they call it wagon at the time. I think they've since then changed it because everything I find is engine 512. So you got engine 512, it has 3 personnel. Engine 510, 3 personnel. Engine 520, 5 personnel. Tower 512, 4 personnel. A medic, and I'm not sure why they send 2, but I think maybe one of them functions as firefighters. That one has 2 personnel. I think this one had the 3rd personnel because of shift change. I think they decided to go. And then the battalion had 2 personnel. This and this, their staffing is 3 people. So like us in April, my guess is April 17th, right around spring break. I don't know when they take their spring break. I think these 2, and I couldn't find anything to verify it, were staffed by ongoing and oncoming shifts. Again, this incident happens at 6 a.m. in the morning. Shift change. Two different units put themselves on a run, again, they can do that. Rescue 510 and Safety 501. This is the initial call. As we go through this, you'll see why I don't go into a whole working second alarm, so on and so forth. It's really irrelevant to what we're trying to learn here. So here's a little bit of information on this building. It's an approximately 6,000 square foot, 2-story, plus a walkout finished basement, non-sprinkled residential structure. It had mostly brick siding with some vinyl. Had a 700 square foot deck that ran around 3/4 of the rear of the structure on the first floor. And the roof consisted of typical residential. It's got rafters, shingles, and all that stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary. So we're going to read through this summary real quick. April 16th, 24-year-old male career firefighter. The victim, Kyle, was fatally injured while trapped in the master bedroom during a wind-driven residential structure fire. 6:03 hours. Again, right at shift change. Dispatch reported a single-family house fire at 6:09. The victim's ladder truck was second arrival on the scene. It was a fire visible on the back exterior of the corner of the residence. Noticing cars in the driveway, no one outside, no lights visible in the house. The lieutenant from the first arriving engine called in a second alarm, and you'll hear that here in a minute. Charged 2.5-inch line was stretched to the front door by the first arriving engine crew. The engine crew stayed at the door with the tack line while the cause of the poor water pressure in the hose line was determined. So they took a 2.5-inch to the front door and cracked it open, had no water pressure. They couldn't figure out why they didn't have any water pressure. And we'll get to that here in a little bit. Kind of plays into this. The victim is lieutenant wearing their SCBA into the residence through the front. Now, hold on a second, let me go back. Go back. Entered the residence through the unlocked front door. 6 a.m., unlocked front door, that should trigger somebody to think about whether there's people still in there. Now, I know they live in a ritzy area, high 6,000 square foot home, but again, that's something to consider here in a little bit as we keep going on. With light smoke showing as they walked into the front room, they walked up the stairs, checked the bedrooms. Again, it's a typical house, 2-story, bedrooms on the second floor. The victim and the lieutenant cleared the top of the stairs and went straight into the master bedroom. Smoke beginning to show at the ceiling level. The victim did a right-hand search, and we're calling him the victim because, again, this is how they reported. While the lieutenant with the thermal imaging camera had checked the bed. So he checked the bed. It's a big room, 6,000 square foot home. It's going to be a big room. He went into the right. The lieutenant checked the bed, see if there was anybody in there. Suddenly, the room turned black and then orange with flames. Basically, you'll hear it, you'll see it. The roof in the back, or the ceiling in the back, comes down, and the wind-driven pushed that.
Medic 143, 5001, east 136. Medic 143, 520.
So you'll see the ceiling in the rear of the house comes down. That's where the wind was blowing into, and again, you'll see all the video on this. It basically turned this into a bad situation. The lieutenant yelled at his crew members, said, "Hey, we need to get the hell out of here." He found the doorway, moved towards the stairs. It went from bad to worse. He knew how he came in. He was going back, trying to get his guy, "Hey, come to me, come to me, come to me." At that point, he fell down the stairs to a curved midway staircase, and you'll see a picture of it and what the staircase looked like afterwards. He tried to get the victim to verbally get with him with the flashlight, and again, the wind gusted up to 48 miles an hour. And we just had some heavy winds the other day. I mean, it took down some trees and whatnot. That's pretty much what they were fighting in this fire. So the IC ordered evacuation, and the lieutenant was brought outside by the engine and rescue crews. Again, we'll kind of get through this. The ladder truck lieutenant received burns on his ears and his right index fingers. At 6:14, the rescue company issued a mayday following the victim's mayday, followed by the victim's mayday. So there was a mayday by a rescue crew at 5:02 that backed on there, who was at the door that pulled him out. They called a mayday, and then you'll hear the mayday from him, from Kyle. They tried to make attempts to get into it with the hose line. They were unsuccessful. They still couldn't get into it because pretty much the whole second floor is fully involved, and you'll see again. At 6:21 hours, due to the intensity of the fire, everybody was evacuated. Operations turned defensive, but the incident command the incident continued into a rescue mode. At 7 o'clock, 6:57 hours, Kyle was found in the master bedroom partially on a couch underneath the front window. So there was something to keep in mind. What was his natural instincts? He was going towards the window. So yeah, I don't know why I did that. That's where they found him. So this is the A side of this structure, and the victim was found, again, where that arrow is pointing, that's where he was found. So I got some pictures I could find. We're going to go through here. So this is what the first floor layout was. Front door here, pretty much staircase up. When we talk about that angle landing, that's where he landed. That's where the lieutenant landed, was there as he got pushed down the stairs. Again, come up the stairs, the master bedroom. This is a big, big master bedroom. Those two front windows were here. That's where they found his body, was up there. Again, instinctively, they went to the second floor thinking 6 a.m. There's got to be victims there. Car in the driveway, no lights on. We got heavy fire in the back. Let's go start doing the rescue. I mean, I don't think anybody in here would disagree with that, right? That's our priority. Here's the basement. Again, if you kind of overlay them all, they pretty much, that's what they look like. So here's a little bit of what I could find. One picture of the layout here. You've got Tower 12, 512, engine 5, or wagon 512, and engine 510. So all the lines were pulled off of here. Initial 2.5-inch tack line, and then a couple backup lines that went around the outside. They went around the outside. And this is what the official drawing looked like. So again, not to scale. Wagon 512, they had 200 foot at 2.5-inch here. 510 pulled 1 3/4 here. Not sure, I think this one ended up coming in later, but a second line that came around here. Everybody was grabbing lines trying to get this fire knocked down at some point. So again, wind direction coming from, I don't know, let's call this the north. Front of the house, this is where the victim was found on a couch in the master bedroom. Couch in the master bedroom. Make that a couch in our master bedroom.
I think it showed north.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could have been. Again, I can't remember.
Right there at the bottom.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's north. So they were straight out of the west. The wind was straight out of the west. So this is what the staircase looked like afterwards. You'll listen to the audio, and what disturbed me was after I found this picture after the audio, where they said the staircase was burned away. They thought there was so much fire that they had actually lost the staircase. They couldn't even see it. Now, thinking of that, this staircase is right in that front door. I mean, I'm pretty sure that this picture was taken almost from the front door. So they didn't have to go in far, but he was able to get to here and fell down the landing, and that's where they pulled the lieutenant out of, was from there. And they thought at that point the stairs were gone. They couldn't see it. There was so much fire involved in the second floor. So, again, a different wagon. They took a hose line around back and they started knocking some stuff down. This is just another good picture of the rear of this structure. So it's important, one, make sure we're doing a good 360 to identify things like this. But you can see how much of this house was burned up right through here. Again, 6,000 square foot. There's the front of the house. I think they had another fatality after this a couple of years later, didn't they? Okay, so a little bit on the timeline here. So 6:01, the first 911 call was received. First alarm dispatch was box 1209 on 5 Charlie. Again, they have some weird stuff or East Coast stuff. I gave you everybody that was on the initial call at 6:03:28. Again, 19 calls came into this. I don't know, I couldn't figure out at what time frame 19 calls came in, but So it's 6:08, wagon 512, again, wagon 512, engine 512 arrived in 5 minutes. He's on the scene, 2-story single-family residence, got heavy fire showing on the B and C side. Side B and C, have the next pumper pick up hydrant at 15, he gives an address, and you'll hear this. There's pretty good audio on this part. Again, at 6:09, Tower 512, I think they came out of the same firehouse, I know they did. So they pulled in behind the first engine. They came in on the B side, so they came from the left looking at it, obviously. Okay, 6:10, wagon 512, we have cars in the driveway, I know if anyone's home, go ahead and hit the second alarm. I gotta give that guy props, I mean, that's something to think about there. Whether they did or didn't, I mean, that's crazy to think, that guy in the midst of all that thought, there's a car in the driveway, 6 a.m., I'm gonna start a second alarm. That's good thinking. At 6:11, Battalion 503 is on the scene. He obtains a status report, and we'll go into this. They give him basically a CAM report. So it's 06:11 and 39. So in 2 minutes, the ladder company made entry into the front door. 2 minutes, that's pretty good. I've seen our ladder crew, they don't move that fast. Not bad. So in 2 minutes, they made it into the front door. Tower 512 did. Again, some of this is obscure, I can't get all the information, but as they go in, the engine crew's pulling a line to that front door there. And they do have a hydrant. They don't have a hydrant. So at 6:13, wagon 512 reports stairs burned out and evacuate. So in 2 minutes, this typical single-family residence fire went to shit in 2 minutes. That's when they were sitting at the front door, ready to make entry, and all of a sudden they look up and it went to hell. So again, 6:13, they request evacuation tones. At 6:13, 512's officers observed in the stairwell as he fell down the stairwell. That's when they dragged him out. 6:14, I can't remember what OPSC is, announced emergency evacuation. I think that's the communication center. All the units get out. 6:14, the officer was pulled out of the structure into the front yard. I don't know why it does that.
That's
I'm gonna pause it. Keep going here so we get this wrapped up because it's obviously taking a pretty long time. So along the incident timeline, 6:14, Rescue 510 transmitted a Mayday call. They rescued the lieutenant and are calling a Mayday for the missing firefighter that they know is missing at this point. At 6:15:06, actual firefighter Wilson transmitted his own Mayday. And you'll hear that too. Again, kind of giving you a timeline to give you an idea how quick this happened. 6:15, he's calling for a Mayday. They arrived at what, 6:09? A little bit of the backstory on Wilson too. He is working on a ladder company he normally doesn't work on. He's normally an engine guy. So, command asked that the last transmission be repeated. Again, you'll hear this. That's 6:15:45. It confirms a Mayday situation.
Engine 111, medic 111.
Says that the 512 bucket, they call them the bucket person. The backsteppers are called buckets. On the tower, is in the stairwell. He is lost, and we have RIT operations. So Rescue 510 was assigned to RIT. So here comes the audio on this with some video that they had.
Charlie for house fire, 16,492.
Everybody hear that okay?
Overlook Drive, Clutchfield, Heron Way. Wagon 512, engine 510, engine 520, tower 512, ammo 510A, medic 512C, battalion 503, at 0604.
42 or 22?
Wagon 512 on the scene.
So this is a...
Two-story, single-family heavy fire show inside. B and C. We're going to head back in, pumper, pick up our hydrant at 15,169.
that was the first engine arriving. There's sides up, we read it.
I'm seeing wagon 512, two-story single-family, heavy fire, size B and C, at 0609, Johnny 503 direct.
Okay, 503 direct. Instructor should be hiding for 10 to get you to the ladder plate. On scene. B-side.
So they have 4 personnel on there, by the way.
Both sides B.
Never did find out where the other 2 personnel went. I don't know.
Medic
If they're outside, first floor. Not a lot of information on the other 2.
Lane 512 to the 30 pumper. Go ahead and come out the first march overlooking lane from a hydrant from the other way.
That's the view from the front. That is the front of the house there. That's what they saw.
The third pumper coming in the first march overlook. Engine 520 to Prince William. Go ahead and dispatch an additional pumper for a secondary water supply. Wagon 512 Prince William. We've carved the driveway unknown if anyone from. Go ahead and hit the second alarm.
So there's that second alarm. There's him. What they did was we'll call it a half-assed 360. They walked to the side, they didn't see everything. Had they walked all the way around, they might have noticed there was a walkout basement. How much of the house was fully involved? I believe the entire front of this house is brick. The back was vinyl siding. That makes a big difference when you talk about fire spread, especially, and I honestly couldn't even find the cause of the fire, but I think it was an outdoor fire that spread into the house.
That was on your slide, a couple slides back. It said outside, Bravo Charlie, or
Yeah.
DC side,
Yeah,
into the attic.
it went up the side of the back side of the house is what it did. It traveled from the basement all the way up the side of that back side of the
Turning the
house.
second alarm.
So again, we showed the picture. This is computer rendition, whatever they call it, of the interior front door, basically straight in up the stairs. They could see out the back. They could see the flames out the back side of the house. They did say that in the interviews that they did of the personnel when they went in the front door. They could see out that back window through the front doorway or through front to back of the house.
K503 is on the scene. K503 to wagon 512.
So the battalion chief arrives. He's asking for a can report. Basically, is what he's doing before he assumes command.
What you got going on?
That's a can report.
One thing right there, outside the house again. They got the towers in there on the second floor. We got vehicles in the driving house, garage circuit breaker, so we're going up to 2.5.
Okay, did everybody catch that?
Some of the 2.5.
So he said, let's back it up for
The
just a
victim
little
is
bit.
2.5.
Third, second floor, and two.
He said tower went up to the second floor, he said.
One thing right there, outside the house again.
You can't really understand very well, but he said something about fire on the outside of the house that's traveled up to the attic. He recognizes that. What other conditions do we have? 48-mile-an-hour winds.
We got the towers in there on the second floor.
Tower's in there on the second floor. He knows the tower went up to the second
We
floor.
got vehicles in the driving house, garage
Vehicles in
circuit
the
breaker,
drive.
so we're going up to 2.5.
We got a 2.5. Pretty good report. I mean, that's a pretty good report.
Copy. Towers on the second floor, you're going in with a 2.5, doing a search. Engine 520 is on the scene. We got the water supply for 12.
Not seeing engine 512.
So again, they talked about, I think the lieutenant, they say that the conditions weren't as bad on the second floor, but some of the reports I heard was when they hit the second floor is off the ground about 3 foot. Pretty thick black smoke.
Okay.
And from what I could gather with this video is the timeline follows what you're seeing as the pictures. What you see is during that time when they're talking.
Engine 520.
So what feels like forever right
Engine
now
520.
is going on. So here we go.
I need your crew in here with the exposure line on exposure. D is in dog.
So again, that line that they pulled off of 512, they take it around to the Delta side, which would be the garage side. He's assigning them to that.
Wagon 512, we got a car upstairs. The stairs are burned out. Can you make sure it's yourself?
So that's where he calls in and says, the stairs are burned up. What they're seeing when they look in that front door is, that's where the ceilings come down and overtake everybody. So what they assumed is now the stairs are burned up. That's what he calls out, hit the evacuation alarm.
Command to Prince William, please hit the evacuation tones.
And as you can see, they put this together, and we've all seen this before.
Wagon 512, drivers,
What the conditions were like inside that bedroom and how bad they went just that quick.
Command to Wagon 512, you park.
Attention all units on the scene of the house fire, with
It's a pretty slow alert
5492 Marsh
time.
Overlook. Marsh Overlook Command has ordered an emergency evacuation.
It's really slow in my opinion.
Command 512, command, water source for good for you, water piping. Copy, need a water source. Command to Wagon 512, were you far out of the building? Repeat.
So right there is the first call for a Mayday. A little bit of a critique on that. That was Rescue 510 that called that. They didn't identify who they were. They just said there's a member from Tower 512 missing in the stairwell. Again, our hearts are racing, our adrenaline's up there, but you got to keep some composure. Let them know who it is that's calling. And okay, that was the last time they heard from firefighter Wilson.
Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Shit, what did I do?
Companies are
Jump
to a
movies.
possible house fire.
I think I went backwards, didn't I?
On scene engine 5. Command has ordered an emergency.
So what I was getting at there was, as we saw in the timeline, the rescue crew called out a Mayday right here, shortly after. This is firefighter Wilson, that's reading right here.
Mayday traffic.
Last message.
Repeat last message. That's why it's vitally important for me as an incident commander to listen to what's going on. Because he doesn't ever repeat, I don't believe. That was the last time they heard from him. That's what they're seeing outside. That's Rescue 510 saying they got the lieutenant of 512 out.
Going inside right now.
In 7 minutes, life went to hell right here. I mean, look at how angry that smoke is.
Is your crew going in?
Medic 143, 1570. Breathing. Engine 190.
Okay, do you need another crew to help?
I mean, look at this smoke. It's not even going up, it's going sideways. Which means that's pushing all that. That's feeding that fire.
510, that's the way we're responding on Charlie, South Star call 50.
Okay, Wagon 510.
Ladder 512, command, we still don't have a water supply for ladder 520 yet.
So that was ladder 512, I think that was their driver saying they don't have water yet.
Command to engine 520. Go ahead. Did you all lay in for the tower? Negative, we picked up 12's line. I just told 12's driver to inject before he's back to the tower. Copy on that. Command to rescue squad 510.
So again, keep in mind, these are the front windows where they found him, right in here.
Status report.
That's the front door, you can see it looks like somebody's standing there. I believe that's the front door.
Flagging 502 over the like a water.
Can you imagine why they said the stairs were gone? Because it looked like the whole second floor was gone.
Command to rescue squad 510. Engine 510 driver command, we got a deck gun in service if you're ready for it. Stand by, we still have a crew inside. I need to find out their status. Command to rescue squad 510.
What'd he say?
Water out there.
So there's always that controversy, do we throw water in while you got crews inside? You ever been inside of a fire and not had a hose line, you're gonna want water, so. It's kind of a toss up. You know, if they're asking for it, throw that water in there. You're only gonna make it better. Can you hurt somebody? Can it get any worse than dead? That's what I'm gonna ask yourselves. If the shit's gone this bad and there's crews inside, you need to start putting some water on. What's the old saying, you're not gonna kill them any deader? But you might help them, and that's what the point is. You know, they're calling for water, he's saying no. You know, we've always had that whole, don't throw water inside.
Water on the fire.
So it looks like
The
the
firefighter in the stairwell need water. And I thought it was safe. Stand 502, I need you to be Division A, please.
Division A geographical, right? So he's going to the front.
We have another water supply for you, so they
On scene Wagon 518, on scene engine 502.
Command to rescue squad 510. Copy. Do we still have a firefighter in the stairwell? Sir. Tower Battalion 3. Tower 13, we have rope. Equipment on side 8. Enter. I need to find out the status of rescue squad 510. They're in the stairwell. Engine 502 command. Pull everybody out of the house now. Attention all units, get out of the house now. Evacuate building now.
Not to critique them, but that's a little late. When you guys agree, I mean, that,
Do you want me to send me?
I'm not critiquing the battalion chief or the instant commander or the crews there, because we probably would be doing the same thing. All the way to the end, we would be trying to go in and get somebody out.
Go ahead.
Somebody had to step in and say, get everybody out. Enough is enough. We all know the Worcestershire 9, or the Worcestershire firefighters who kept going in one after another. Somebody had to stop everybody from going in. I mean, that's
Command to Division A, we're ready to hit this water pipe. So we're looking for status of rescue squad 510.
I don't think there's much left of this one. So again, 2007, the technology wasn't quite caught up with what it is today. So you're getting probably a camera on a shoulder or a Nokia flip phone that's got a camera on it. But you get the idea how much this thing is going, how much wind is driving this thing, how quick it just burnt this house up. I mean, you're talking 10 minutes it burnt the entire roof and second floor of this house. It burned holes in the floor on the second floor because it got up in there so fast and it was burning so quickly and so hot. They were behind the 8 ball when they got there. And we'll talk about some of the things they might have done different, but some of the things they probably learned from this that we can adopt to prevent this from happening to our department.
Bridgeport,
I don't know why it does that.
So the NIOSH summary of this. So again, I researched a lot of this. So what they do is they go through, and if you, again, I am reiterating what Chief Schaefer said. If you've never read the NIOSH report, it's pretty dry. One, it's pretty cut and dry, I should say. And then they have a recommendation of changes. It doesn't mean that you should or you will change them, the recommendations of changes. Now there's a lot of things that we can change as a department, some things that has to happen in the upper echelon that we have no control over. And I can almost guarantee everyone that I ever went through to pick this one, the NIOSH report on every single one of them said manpower. I mean, I think FDNY gets, if they have a death, it says manpower. They need more people on the scene. I don't know how, but I've actually never read one, but I assume they probably do. But every one of them I read, it said you need more manpower. So some of their summary is that they ensure that SOPs for size up and advancing hose lines address the hazards of high winds and gusts. Do we think about that on a day-to-day? Have we ever thought about writing an SOP on that? Probably not. But good old NIOSH, they like to go through and they'll Monday morning quarterback and say, this is what you should be doing. And it's not a bad thing, it's recommendations, because sometimes we as a department don't see that stuff. So they recommend we write an SOG or an SOP on that. Whew, man, we could write SOGs and SOPs till we're blue in the face. But what we should be doing is taking this information here, the hazards of high winds and gusts, and stick that right in the back of our little toolbox in our brain. And when we have days like we had the other day that was 60-mile-an-hour gust winds and we have a fire, we need to think about how that's going to affect our strategy and tactics and how we address fires with those kind of winds. I mean, that you couldn't have got a more perfect scenario in a fire, I think, than to have the back of the house to the west, the front of the house to the east, and 45, 80-mile-an-hour winds coming out of the west. And the fire starting back of the house. Just pushing right through. I mean, it's a perfect worst case scenario. Some of the other things they talked about, ensure that primary search crews either advance with a hose line or follow an engine crew with a hose line. Again, the other one, ensure that adequate staffing. Not something we can change. We'll talk about the primary search with a hose line and without. And I think that's important because we stress you guys can search without a hose line. We've not talked about that before. But again, that's identifying the hazards of high winds and gusts is a good idea. How fast is this fire going to burn? What's fueling this? When they open that front door, they just created that tunnel right through there. I would love to know what kind of pressures they were getting out that front door when they opened that thing up. And because the door opened inward, at one point I read that when the ceiling came down, it slammed the front door shut. There was that much pressure when everything caved in. That ceiling on the second floor came down. The pressure was so intense it pushed the front door shut, which means they didn't even have the hose line inside yet. So again, ensure that primary search and rescue crew either advance with a hose line or follow an engine crew with a hose line. We stress you can do that. It's going to be using that experience and that knowledge. How deep can you get? Where should you be? Where should you not be? We can't tell you whether you should or shouldn't. We can all sit back and go, yeah, they should have waited. But when they went to the front door, and the report I read was they went to the front door, the engine crew's there with the hose line. They're like, we're going to the second floor. We know there's bedrooms up there. Come with us. And they went. What they didn't realize is they cracked that nozzle open and there was no pressure. So the engine crew was sitting back waiting for the kinks to get out of the hose line and everything else. That delayed the hose line getting put in place. But what should have happened? And I'm not saying it didn't. I know it didn't because it's not in the radio traffic. Hey, 512, be advised, we have no water right now. Keep an eye out. Come on down, whatever the case may be. So, some more stuff again, ensure that firefighters are sufficiently trained in survival skills. I showed you their skills, they've been trained in it. Some of them had been. In fact, I think he was one of them that was trained in survival skills. They don't tell you to what level, they don't tell you who should be doing it or where you should get that from. Ensure Mayday protocols are reviewed, modified, and followed. I think they did a really good job on it considering the situation. Any Mayday situation is going to be scary. You're going to have a lot of people armchair quarterbacking that, but it's what you're doing at that particular moment. You can train, but you can't put that level of stress on you to train like you would be in a real situation. Another thing, ensure that water supply is established and hoses laid out prior to crews entering the fire structure. Again, we're an aggressive people in the fire service are aggressive. We want to be aggressive. They were aggressive. That's kind of one of those that, yeah, they probably should have had a water supply, but that wasn't the issue. The issue was they had a lot of kinks. They probably should have worked on doing their hose loads and whatnot. So again, I think this is probably another one these two right here are probably in every single NIOS report there is. Again, come back to, do we write some more SOPs and SOGs on this? You really can't. What you can do is, we can do trainings like this to recognize that there's situations that are associated with high winds and rapid fire progression that's going to change the way you operate within a structure. Okay? I don't really think we can do exact trainings with it, unless you know a way we can burn a house one day when it's...
We're not going to.
We're not going to. Again, you just have to recognize that. So additionally, a couple other things that they recommended is ensure that dispatch collects and communicates information on occupancy and extreme environmental conditions. So basically this comes back to some of the stuff outside of the department's control was dispatch collects information. I could not find a whole lot of information on what kind of calls. They said there was 19 calls. I couldn't find not one 911 call. I couldn't find any information on it. And that comes back to, just like our dispatch, I'm sure they have issues with their dispatchers. We would like our dispatchers to be more trained on information that they collect. That's one of the things they suggested. I think, again, that's something that every time, have they got some more information? I do know that one of the calls, I say nothing, one of the calls came back from next to this address, there's a house fire, which was the next door neighbor's address. So some of that information should have been relayed on. I don't know if it was or what. Back in 2007, Lieutenant Wicker, we didn't have MDTs, did we? No. Yeah, and I don't know if they did or not. I couldn't tell you. So again, ensure that radios are operable on the fire ground environment. Well, that's why we buy them, because they're supposed to be tested to be that way, but that's outside of the department's information or what they can change. So additionally, the department did its own survey and summary of the incident. Of course, I wouldn't expect anything less of them. It's a big department again. A lot of individuals on this department. They did their own investigation and they put together a team to investigate this. It's the first death they had since 1966. So what, 29 years, 39 years? I can't do the math that quick. 39 years, 49 years, 39 years. In their existence, something like that. These are the people that were involved in doing this investigation for their department. As you can see, they asked a few people, Montgomery County, Fairfax County, came in and they assisted with them, I think, because they had been through it before. And those two chief officers had been a part of the investigations of their own department of fatalities. So as you can see, Fairfax County, Virginia, and Maryland are both on the East Coast. They're big county departments. Very well known out there, other than your big cities like Baltimore, DC, and all that. Your counties are usually combined departments of volunteer and career people. So what they come up with is they did an examination and review. They reviewed the radio traffic. They looked at scene photographs and sketches. They interviewed people, took written statements. The fire marshal's office information gave them some stuff. They did multiple site visits to the place afterwards. They did personnel interviews, and then they did follow-up interviews. They conducted this over, do you remember, Chief? I think it was like 18 months it took them to do this. It was a long time. They went over policies and procedures for their department through the Fire and Rescue Association. They looked at some of those, and the Office of Public Safety Communications, which is where I think that OPSC that I talked about, their dispatch center, for their policies and procedures on how they run things. They examined the gear, which went through rigorous training, rigorous examinations through third-party companies. Examined his gear, his SCBA. They also got to examine it, and they also gave it to a separate third parties. If they came up with anything, and of course, again, at independent labs, they did some field testing on the portable radios, their pumps, hoses, and nozzles, again, to eliminate some of the factors that may have had an effect on it. So some of their research included these organizations, these regulations, all through this. This is what they looked at, all this stuff here, to come up with their final report. And what they came up with was the Marsh Overlook incident was their major factors. And they came up with 6 major factors of why this happened. The first arriving unit, fire suppression force. So they broke it down into this. They wanted to make sure that performance measures are established. So like Chief Schaefer does, we do, how long does it take you to get a hose line into place? How long does it take you to do this? They went over their operating guidelines to identify required tasks. First driving, second arriving, and so on and so forth. Initial dispatch complement. Single family dwelling. There's 3 engines, 1 truck, 1 EMS, and 1 battalion chief. Was that enough? That's what they came up with. Unit minimum staffing is 16 firefighters, 3 engines, 3 personnel each, 9 personnel total. 1 truck with 4 personnel, 2 EMS, and 1 battalion chief. So that was what was dispatched. What they found out was, again, 1710 versus 1720, and I'm sorry, there's some typo shit in there. Applies science or documented improvement science on the 4 personnel versus 3 personnel. FDNY did a really big study on this because they took a 5th person off their engines, and it talked about how now they're 25% slower because they don't have a 5th guy on their engine. So can you imagine what the study would show with 3? But if you're interested, 1710 and 1720 identifies how many firefighters should be on the fire ground initially, and so on and so forth. Again, they talked about some of that stuff in their report, and that's really based on a 2,000 square foot home. Okay, single family, 2-story without a basement. No exposures. 17 firefighters, 1710. 2,000. How many square foot was this house? 6,000. It was like a small apartment building. Okay, so it identifies what tasks the 17 should do. So again, this is 6,000 square foot. They identified the problem with it was how big it was. Minimum staffing was 16. Operational guidelines established and tasks expected beyond that of the initial. So what they also identified is there's other tasks beyond those 16 or 17 people. Ladder replacement, EMS, utility control, so on and so forth. That's what you start thinking about, the extra people working companies, why we should have 5 on the trucks, not 3. Because you can do ladder placement, you can do utility control with one two trucks, two half trucks. So this is what they recommended. They need to increase staffing. Again, we're going to increase staffing. Increase staffing on all specialty pieces from 4 to 5 or 6. That would be the rescues and their ladders, I believe. And increase dispatch complement to discontinued graduated dispatch complements based on the structure. Again, how they operate is a little different. They still do the same stuff, but it's different. I know that's weird. So the one thing they did do is a specialty unit resource allocation study. Again, I talked about the 2 rescues, but they actually have 5 now because they realized they needed more. They had 2 in specific areas, and what they were using them for, they need to add more. So they did add more. So the next thing was the size up of the development of the fire spread. So some of the contributing factors were here. You can look at them, 6 o'clock in the hours, large single family square foot, 6,000 square foot. They made search and rescue a priority, which I agree with, but they failed to recognize there was a large volume of fire on the exterior. Complemented with the heavy winds, it turned ugly. So they requested additional resources, primary and secondary water sources. So they had kind of like they had the check marks. They had it going. They were doing good. They just didn't recognize one factor in there. So they went obviously offensive mode in primary search. They had a couple things that failed on them, and we'll talk about that again. So a couple things that they failed to identify in all situational factors. Again, they failed to complete the 360 survey. The rear of the house was not fully surveyed. They would have noticed it was from the basement to all the way to the attic. It was, the back of the house was involved. You saw it in the beginning. You saw the back side of the house. The rear doors were left open by escaping occupants. That's one of the things they identified was they went out the back door. I don't know why they went out the back door, but I don't know if I talk about it anymore in here, but as far as occupants go, a passerby stopped when they saw the house on fire, got out of his car, knocked on the front door, said, "Your house is on fire." He went back to his car, left. The occupants went out the back of the house and went to a neighbor's house. They never called 911. Of the 19 calls, the homeowners themselves never called. And I think it was because, and again, I'm going to assume at this point, I think what I read was the passerby in the car said, "I called 911. That's your house on fire." So they never called. Well, the problem with them never calling was they never called to say we're out. But again, I don't, with this, and you got to think about the front door was unlocked. When they knocked on the door, they answered the door. They don't know their house is on fire yet, but he could see it. They closed the door, went and got stuff that they wanted, went out the back door. Again, depends. Some people go out their back door, some people go out their front door, some people probably don't even know what their front doors look like because they go through the garage every day. So again, they left the back doors open. That contributed, that was a big contribution. Had they done that 360, they might have identified that and been able to close that door and maybe save them some time. I don't know. They could have taken the hose line around the rear, knocked down some fire, and then pushed in from there. Again, we're Monday morning quarterbacking. So again, environmental impact in the building construction, the wind, the construction material and design. They did a big study on that, talking about the lightweight construction. They recommended a review of all procedures, procedural changes, on-scene size up, on-scene report, which is kind of what we just did today, department-wide training and needs, strategy and tactics. Again, I think that's, I don't think that's meant in a derogatory way. I think it's just, hey, let's identify some of these other strategies and tactics we can use. And some officer development decision-making. Those are big. I mean, as officers, that's what we do every day is make decisions. So now the high wind impact, again, 23 to 35 mile an hour sustained winds, gusts up to 50. First arriving officers unaware of weather and related advisories. I kind of find that hard to believe, but apparently that's what they found out, that the first arriving officers didn't know anything about any of these weather-related advisories, considering they had a huge front that came through with a big storm the night before. And this was the next morning, and the winds were pretty high. So
they didn't standing outside and know it was windy?
did you not see the wind, the smoke going sideways instead of up?
House.
And again, we're not gonna Monday morning quarterback, but I think when they talked to these guys, that's what they came up with, was, and it says weather-related advisories. Nowadays, everybody gets it to their phone, you know, Channel 13 of the Weather Channel says, hey, we got this. Again, you're talking 2007. Smartphones were only for AT&T customers. For those of you who remember when iPhone first came out, it was AT&T only. So they weren't aware of the advisories. Now, were they aware of the weather? I would say they probably were, just not the fact that it's so, it was going to be such an impact. And that's what they talked about. And obviously the high wind impact intensifies development growth. We all know that stuff. Accelerated, so on and so forth. That's nothing new to us. It really isn't. We talk about that with the fire flow and all that stuff. So a couple of the recommendations, they said review and revise all procedures related to operations environmental extremes. My guess is they probably added a blurb in there and said we need to train on this once a year. Hey, keep an eye on the weather. If it's going to be windy, think about this. Because it might be windy one day and it may help you. The wind's blowing the perfect way. It's blowing it out the house. So, adjustment of dispatch complements, again, changing what they send on their initial communicating weather-related information to all personnel. Again, this is going back 12 years ago. Develop a policy for expectations of wireless device use and programming. There you go. Pagers. Make sure everybody gets their beepers hooked up. I'm going to laugh because that's old school. So, standard shift change information exchange. There must have been something going on there. Again, I couldn't find a whole lot of information on it. Related training is needed. So I'm going to whip through some of this stuff. Structure size, lightweight construction. We all know that. Big house, lightweight stuff, vinyl siding. These are some of the contributing factors that happen. And I apologize. I know we're getting pretty long on this. I laughed at Jason because his was over an hour, and I'm probably going to be the same way. Again, this is not stuff that we don't know. This is stuff that they put into a recommendation. Again, back in 2007, a lot of new information's come out since 2007. Some of it may have come from here, from this particular fire. So again, raise your firefighting force, minimum staffing and dispatch complement increase to combat the lightweight construction of material. Review and revise all procedures related to operations with various types of building construction. Again, residence versus commercial versus type 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 structures. Related training needs. Rapid intervention teams. Again, 2 in, 2 out satisfied. At the time of May Day, no rapid intervention team was established. We were 5 minutes into it. You guys get on the scene in 5 minutes. You're lucky if you got the third engine there sometimes, right? Same thing with your first engines. Third engines, sometimes 5. 5 minutes, they were in a May Day situation. It's not unusual that they're not going to have a rapid intervention team. In fact, I remember Chief Schaefer talking about most emergencies happen within the first 10 minutes, correct? Right here is one of them. So he was unable to rescue, self-rescue. Data files indicate that the pass was not functional. Now, that's not functional because of, they're not sure. I did read up on this. It was so far damaged they could not tell if it was functional at the time, but at the time they tested it, it did not function. So my guess is it was probably functional, it just was not turned on. He did not turn his pass device on. Again, firefighting rescue efforts attempted by various crews, but activities not coordinated under a rescue group supervisor. They're Monday morning quarterbacking this thing. They won a group supervisor within the first 5, 6, 7 minutes here. Yeah, okay. Pass device sounding on fire ground. I think those are other people's pass devices. That was some of the other issues. Some of the recommendations, again, you can read these, clarify associated procedures regarding RIT. I know our department does a lot of RIT stuff. Everybody agree with that? I mean, I think that's one of the things we focus on a lot is RIT. Standardized procedures designated the RIT crew. Establish rescue divisions within the incident command structure when a firefighter rescue operation is encountered. That's a good one right there. So maybe we should have a RIT chief. I mean, sounds bad, and it would pull the chief on every single one of them, but how many times, I mean, the last fire we had, so 142s, you and 111s was a rig crew. Should there be a chief officer with you? I don't know, it may not be a bad idea, or some sort of rig group supervisor that doesn't have a crew to worry about, now he's got a group.
Well, if
So-
you think back to the training we did last year over at the house with all the multiple crews, we had a chief, and it pretty much took a chief to run that whole entire
yeah.
thing.
Yep.
And that was just running 2 crews.
Try it again. So that's, again, back in 2007, they're establishing some of this stuff and what they hope works and what they hope doesn't work. Again, I think besides one of them, every one of them said they need an effective firefighting force. And if you looked at the graph, in 10 years, they hired like 200 and something people, career firefighters, but their volunteer ranks fell. But that's a whole different story. Related training needs. So the last thing was the incident control management of it. Wagon 512's officer initially in charge of the incident. Battalion 503 arrived 3.5 minutes after they marked on the scene. Standard control, 8 crews operating when command was established. See, that's not right. There was not 8 crews operating. There again, we didn't see the whole thing, but 7 more crews joined the operation prior to the arrival of another command level officer. I tried to put some timelines together and I couldn't figure it out. Like I said, some of these things don't add up, some of them do. So the second command officer arrived in excess of 13 minutes. So what I don't understand is it says here the second command officer arrived in 13 minutes, but there was already 15 crews there. I don't think so. So I think they got some of that stuff mixed up. Again, some of this is copy and paste because I'm not going to rewrite everything all over again. So no immediate command post support. Again, I know that they have 2, but I don't know what their aid does. So events occurring within the first minutes after establishing command, they had emergency evacuation. The fire progressed rapidly, depletion of on-scene resources. Everybody is now sucked into doing something. Operating in hostile environment conditions. After 2 minutes of establishing command, a mayday from the unit. So just that quick. I mean, everything, like I said, everything deteriorated very quickly. Mayday from the firefighter reporting he was lost. We heard that. Unanswered radio communications from units and IDLS. Confirmed lost firefighter situation. So one of the things they talked about with this was, you heard them asking 510, what's your status? Now, for those of you who've never sat outside while they're looking at a burning building and knowing your guys are inside, there's nothing worse than to not hear back from your people. And you all think it's that I'm being a pain in the ass when I'm standing outside saying, you know, engine 142, what's your status? Now you've got a down firefighter. You know there's crews that are trying to get in there. They're almost, and I hate to say it, but they're almost freelancing. Because Rescue 5 and 10, I never heard them assign anything. But all of a sudden they're in there, they've kind of taken over trying to rescue this firefighter or red operations. So when now all of a sudden they're on the radio saying, we're here, where in the hell did you come from, how'd you get there? But now he's hitting them on the radio and they're not answering. Now, do we have more firefighters down? Because you saw what he saw. The entire second floor of this building is completely engulfed. I've got multiple crews inside trying to rescue one guy and nobody's answering me. So that's why it's important to listen to your radio. I know Mike gets frustrated, Lieutenant Wicker gets frustrated, Jerry, you know, all you who listen to the radio get frustrated when I hit you up and you're not answering, and my voice gets a little bit more irritated, so to speak. It's because I need to know. Because when you don't start answering me, the stuff in my mind starts going, are they down? You know, where are they at? Especially when that building's on fire. So again, that's some of the stuff that they identified. Resource coordination, operational discipline, accountability system. I think that's one of the things we lack on. If I had a battalion aide, we'd have a great accountability system. I'm just saying, I'm gonna throw that out there. If we had a battalion aide, we'd have a good accountability system. It's on camera.
Even without one.
And scene.
In scene. Cool.
That's not saying we don't have one, but it would make it much easier. Crew integrity, talked about making sure we keep good crew integrity. Again, I could not find out what the other half of the tower crew was doing. It didn't really say. I mean, unless I dabbled into, like, there was one report that was 475 pages long, and I'll be honest with you, I couldn't bring myself to read through 477 pages. So crew integrity, compliance with evacuation orders. They ordered it a couple times, you heard it on there, and they still didn't have people saying we're out. Eventually they did. Modes of operation, again, offensive versus defensive. Low frequency, high risk event. That's what most fires are for us. They're low frequency, high risk. But they're referring to Mayday because it's Prince William County. They do a lot of fires. We don't, but to them, a firefighter Mayday is a low frequency, high risk event. Firefighter rescue operations, and no direct communication is established with missing firefighters. So again, those are some of the things they identified. So recommendations, it must be immediate resource assigned to arrive with the battalion commander to initiate command support activities. We kind of do that, although I think on a working fire right now it's just one chief officer, right? Which is typically the safety officer. I think that we lack on doing some accountability because we've become complacent in the fact that, hey, we're just going to knock this fire out and then we're going back to the firehouse real quick. We don't take into consideration unless it becomes a structure fire, auto repair place on Washington Street or an apartment building of some sort. I think that even from my standpoint, we could do a better job of accountability and do some command support activities. It's just nobody wants to do it. Develop and implement an incident command support team. Again, staffing position analysis for all rank levels, and I think that come back to, I'm not sure what that means. So, compliance with established procedures and related training needs. So on this, again, we're Monday morning quarterbacking. This is a few things I came up with. So how could this be prevented? And this kind of goes along with the sheet that that you've got in front of you. Some of the things I came up with was more information obtained by dispatch, noted where the homeowners were. I felt like they could have done a better job. Had they gotten them information, that wouldn't have stopped them from doing a search, but it might have changed their mindset of running in real quick and trying to conduct a search while an engine had a hose line that was down. They needed to complete a 360. It might have changed their tactics. They may have came into the rear of the building. Conducted a search with an attack crew based on fire presented. Basically what they saw, they should have probably waited for the hose line. Especially the high wind, the situation, things like that. Again, I'm Monday morning quarterbacking. This is my suggestions. Ensure that exterior ladders are placed. That was one of the things that took a while for them to get, was exterior ladders. And there's no right or wrong answers to this. Anybody have anything else they want to add to what we could have done to prevent this? What they could have done, what we can do to prevent this from happening in Washington Township? Because this is any fire department in the USA, at any address in the USA. Based on the information, anybody got anything else?
Well, you already mentioned it, but it was that one thing that was also in there was the fact that I caught early on where the guy was saying it was outside fire, outside on the backside going up to the attic, but they still took the attack line into the front door. There was never mention that they went to the outside with an attack line.
They did.
And they mentioned it several times. You could hear it was outside into the attic.
And they did, and again, not being there,
Well, I mean, yeah.
you got a crew that runs in and go do a search, which 6 a.m. in the morning, no lights on, car in the driveway, that's good. Let's take a line in with them and we'll protect them while they do a search. I think that was the mindset. Again, I didn't dabble completely into this, and Chief Schaefer is aware of this incident. He might be able to add to that. They may be in their thought process on it. Get a next line in, but it went so fast, I don't think.
In the modeling of this, where they show the heat temperatures and all that kind of stuff, even if they would have taken a line in with them, they still wouldn't have survived that.
It went so
It's
fast.
back to where Lieutenant Dessler said, is that you had to get water on that surface from the Charlie side. That was going to be the only way to extinguish that fire, because that's what was burning until the ceiling fell and the wind pushed it on top of them.
Again, it was a perfect wave of bad things that went bad.
We don't, necessarily always going in the front door, you know.
Yeah, and we talked about that.
It used to, it's always safe.
Yeah.
Front
Used to
door,
always
go in,
be
go in,
that way,
go in.
yeah.
Again, 2007, I'm not saying that was a long time ago, but a lot of things have changed and a lot of tactics have changed, and we look at things a little differently.
Unfortunately,
From things like
situations
this.
like this that make us do it.
Yep, so keep that in mind. Again, what can we do to prevent this from happening? Ensure that a complete 360 is completed. Know what you're looking for. Again, I talked about this in the last officer process. We don't do a 360 just to walk around the house to say we did it. We're looking for things. Know what you're looking for. What's important. Know how weather can affect the fire ground. Control the doors and windows. Think of flow path. I mean, that's been beaten into our head, but really, it's just how does the air move within the structure? I mean, you can call it flow path, you can call it whatever the hell you want. It has an effect on the fire. Ensure the hose lines are in place or are being placed to protect crews operating. Again, read the situation, know that you're going into a pretty high risk area. Know what other crews are going and assigned to, and I've hammered on this. Know where other crews are operating. On this White House, I said, if you're going on the second floor to search, you better listen to the radio, because if the first floor crew that's fighting that fire says we've lost it, you better figure out how to get the hell out. Know what other crews are operating. So if you're on the engine crew, you should know there's a ladder crew above you searching those bedrooms. Because if you can't control that fire and you've lost it, you need to let them know they need to get out. Or, hey, we're going to go back to the stairs and protect it for you. Let's get you out of there. We can't control this. Communication between crews, that falls in line with what I just talked about. So any other discussion on that? So last thing I have, this just kind of hits home. That's pretty much the gist of this one. Again, the kid was 24 years old, had less than a year on. It reminds me of, how old are you, Merriman? 28. And you got 4 years on, right? So roughly. That's like Merriman coming on, 24 years old, and we lost him. Same thing with Nick. I think Nick was about that young too. So
I was 21.
it can go bad real quick. He's 12 now. He's 12 now. He went from 21 to 12. I think everybody agrees with that.
Love you, Nick.
Same age as his girlfriend.
So this was something.
There, fat boy.
It's like DJ all over again, isn't it?
Ow.
So here's what I found on something to honor him.
We have lost a son,
That was the fire chief at the
a
time.
brother, a fiance,
He retired
a friend, and
about
five
6 months after this happened.
Kyle was always known as a small guy, but you couldn't tell him that. He had more drive than any guy twice his size. So when he told me he was going to be a firefighter, it didn't surprise me at all.
He was so proud of what he did, and I was so proud
That's
of
his
him.
fiance, or was his fiance.
Every day after work, he would always have a new story to tell about his day, or something silly that happened when he was there.
Kyle was truly the happiest I've ever seen him. Although our hearts are breaking, we all take comfort and pride in Kyle's accomplishments.
For myself and many others, this is the hardest pain I've ever felt. But when the grief subsides, Kyle would want us to celebrate his life. He passed away doing what he loved and will always and forever be my hero. Although we are all here mourning the loss of an incredibly special person, I can't help but to feel honored and blessed to have spent the last 3 years of my life with such an inspiring person.
And if that wind had been just a little calmer this past Monday, there's no doubt in my mind that Kyle would be looking at his 3rd undefeated season. There'd be no doubt which team would be taking home the sportsmanship award, and that's the team of Station 12.
He loved doing everything he could to help people around him, and he did so without wanting anything in return. You are gone, but you will never be forgotten. May you rest in peace. I'll be seeing you, bro.
Prince William County has lost a dedicated servant. Prince William County has lost a hero.
The Prince William County Department of Fire and Rescue is sounding the last alarm for Technician 1, Kyle Robert Wilson. Technician Wilson started with Prince William County Department of Fire and Rescue on January 23rd, 2006, and proudly served the citizens of Prince William until his ultimate sacrifice. Single-story school, partial evacuation, investigating, county command at 6%.
For those who've never been to a funeral, that's probably the worst feeling you can ever go to. Let's not make it happen in our department. I sure don't want to go through that. Anybody got any questions or concerns about it?